Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Good evening, everyone. We are going to continue with our lectures on the Patisambhida Magga. Last week we didn't have the lectures because of the full moon day. Since in Uposatha days we are having a different program in IIT, and also in future we will share a complete list of days that we will be conducting in a particular semester. Then the previous week I was a bit sick, so I was unable to conduct. So we are joining after 2 weeks. I'll be using the same handout, and I have added some parts to the handout which I distributed in the first week. And so far we have discussed how the Patisambhida jnanas are attained and how they come into purification or variation. The attainment of, there are two types of Patisambhida jnanas. If we recap what we have done so far, there are two types of Patisambhida jnanas. First is the original, the basic Patisambhida jnanas attained by any noble being who attains nobility, reaches nobility. Then that Patisambhida jnana comes into variation or comes into a higher degree of capacity. It gets more competent by reaching another stage. Then it is being called as Pabinna Patisambhida. It means the Patisambhida jnana has come into a higher stage, and the person is capable of depicting certain distinguished characteristics from other noble beings. So especially they are capable of expressing themselves very well, and also to relate things to the Dhamma, and also they understand, due to their metacognition of Patibhana Patisambhida, they are capable of knowing what would be the best way to enlighten or teach someone to have that particular knowledge, to arouse the particular knowledge in someone. And then we started to talk about 5 factors that are necessary for the attainment of Patisambhida jnanas. Some are related to the purification, and we talked about how they are attained in 2 places, Sekha Bhumi and Asekha Bhumi. Then we talked how they come into purification, how they are purified. There are 5 factors that are required for purification. We talked about 1 factor, Adhigama, by attaining nobility, like especially the arahantship, Patisambhida jnana of a lower noble would become purified. Now, and we talked a story about Venerable Punabbasu Kutumbika Putta Tissa. It's quite a long name. And his story gives us lots of ethical, like that could be used in our practical daily Dhamma life, and how much respect a person should have towards the Dhamma. He walked back, just because having a one doubt, he walked back 100 yojanas to clarify it. And on the way, at some place, he had become an arahant, and he had overcome all the doubts, and he was able to answer all the questions that were asked by the monks in the monastery he visited later on. Now, the remaining factors, if I list down the factors that are relevant or that would lead for the purification, Adhigama is number 1, Adhigama, then Pariyatti. Pariyatti, as you know, Pariyatti is the teachings of the Buddha. Studying them would surely purify the Patisambhida jnana of a noble being. Then Savana, Savana is listening. Savana is listening, listen to the Dhamma, obviously. Then Paripuccha, this has 2 meanings, we'll talk about that, questioning and also interpreting. Then Pubbha Yoga. Right, Pubbha Yoga. Adhigama we discussed about it, the arahantship, attainment of arahanthood. With the attainment of arahanthood, obviously, Patisambhida jnanas become very distinct, and their competency, capacity increases. Then Pariyatti, studying the Buddha's teachings. Yes, obviously, when you study the Buddha's teachings, your Patisambhida jnana elevates, its capacity elevates. So, one is capable of using them, especially using, and also when we are studying the Dhamma, we will start to get certain enlightenments, like enlightening effects happen in us. And we start to see the things in various ways, because the Dhamma was preached by an omniscient person. So, he has already put in various methods to understand the reality. Therefore, by studying the Buddha's teachings, we also get new insights about ourselves. Even arahants could insights here. When I say insights, it could be related to meditation and also to the world and in general about various things. So studying his teachings, wisdom faculty would obviously increase, and as a result, Patisambhida jnanas would grow, would be purified. Pariyatti, Buddha's words, teachings. Pariyatti means Buddha's words. When studying Buddha's words, Patisambhidas, one has attained, become purified. The example is given, Patisambhida of Venerable Tissadatta Thera and Venerable Nagasena Thera became purified due to studying the Buddha's teaching. So Nagasena kept on studying actually, and he attained Sotapannahood while preaching Dhamma to one of his devotees actually. And both the people, the preacher and the listener, both became enlightened. As the story goes, teacher was looking this through his psychic powers, and he said, Nagasena, you killed 2 birds with 1 stone, or 2 birds with 1 arrow. So because you made the upasika, the lady, female devotee, who was like a mother to him, to get enlightened, understand the teachings, and he himself got enlightened, became a Sotapanna. His attainment of arahantship happened after, like, with the contemplation of Dhamma, what he has studied, while he was contemplating Dhamma, as the story goes on. He was contemplating the Dhamma, and with that, maybe there was a meditation going on. I exactly doesn't remember the story. I have read it, but it's a vague memory. So somehow his studies also helped him to attain. Then after becoming a Sotapanna, obviously he studied Dhamma. And this also happened with Venerable Moggali Puttathissa Thera. So when Thera was brought into the sasana, the young child, the 16-year-old child was made to be a monk, means he got the faith, he had the faith in 2 venerables were his teachers. They were called 𝐷𝐸𝐿 and 𝐶𝐸𝐿. Those were the true teachers, 𝐷𝐸𝐿 and 𝐶𝐸𝐿. One of them made him to be a monk, and then he sent him to the other monk to studies. But first he made sure that he attains the Sotapannahood, so he would not disrobe. So he made sure that the person, the young monk, Moggali Puttathissa, would become a Sotapanna, and then without giving him further meditation instructions, he encouraged him to study the Dhammas, because they knew this is the person who is going to establish the sasana in future. And he didn't encourage him to become an arahant. He taught the teacher, 𝐷𝐸𝐿 or 𝐶𝐸𝐿, I forgot the exact person. So they were the teachers, the 2 teachers who tutored him. And the one who ordained him initially had a concern not to make Moggali Puttathissa an arahant before he studied the Dhamma, because he felt maybe after accomplishing his task, he might feel as it's not necessary for him to study the Dhamma anymore. That could happen, because after you have accomplished your task, because we are studying Dhamma to few purposes, for our own liberation and also to support the sasana. But if someone, like, having accomplished and having become fulfilled by removing all the suffering, there is a possibility that he may get discouraged to study the Dhamma, which is necessary for the enlightenment. They would only study it for the purpose of securing it, protecting it, and propagating it. And there was a slight possibility that he may not engage in studying the Dhammas. So he didn't encourage him. He stopped his meditation, stopped giving instructions further. And he sent him to the other teacher. So the other teacher could teach him Dhamma and Vinaya. And before that, because Moggali Puttathissa came to the sasana intending to return back after studying some Dhamma, so to make sure, because he initially had the intention of disrobing, to make sure that he would not disrobe and he would be very well established in the sasana, he showed him his path to be a Sotapanna. So then, Moggali Puttathissa's case, he was a Patisambhida Labhi. And after becoming an Sotapanna, he studied the Dhamma. That would also have helped his Patisambhida jnanas to become purified with the attainment of arahantship. And then Savana, listen to the Dhamma, Patisambhida jnanas of the person who listened to the Dhamma attentively becomes purified. This is a story of a young monk who was the nephew of Venerable Dhammadinna, who lived in Sri Lanka, one of the 7 greatest arahants who appeared in Sri Lanka, and who claimed to be. Actually, it was the last one who claimed this. He said this, that all these 7 were followers of the Bodhisattva actually. They were coming with him, and due to their negligence in certain lives, instead of attaining arahantship or liberation while the Buddha was alive, their attainment was delayed, and they were born in Sri Lanka and they became arahants. And 7th was the Maliyadeva. One of them was Dhammadinna. Venerable Dhammadinna Mahathera, who was very famous for solving many questions and also who helped one of his teachers to get rid of a wrongly held notion about himself, like believing him to be an arahant while being a putujana. He helped one of his teachers to overcome this wrong idea and to attain arahantship. And Dhammadinna is also famous for showing the heavens and hell to the humans in order to make them, to get their attention towards his preaching. While the people were not listening to his Dhamma, they were talking, chit-chatting with each other while Dhammadinna was preaching Dhamma. He made a psychic miracle so the people could see the hell and they were frightened, and then he showed them the divine realms. So they were delighted and they attentively listened to the Dhamma talk. So Dhammadinna is one of the famous teachers in our commentaries. And his nephew also got ordained. His name was Sudhamma Samanera. Venerable Sudhamma, his Patisambhida jnanas became purified due to listening to the Dhamma. Yes, Savana, listening to the Dhamma. Patisambhida jnanas of a person who listens to the Dhamma attentively becomes purified. Become purified. Patisambhida of Sudhamma Samanera became purified due to listening to the Dhamma attentively. This Samanera was the nephew of Venerable Thalangara Vasi Dhammadinna Mahathera. He became an arahant in the building where his head was shaven at his ordination. Kuragga means the place or the house where shaving was done. The Samanera sat in the area where the uncle Thera was solving Dhamma issues and memorized the whole 3 baskets of Dhamma. It is mentioned. Whole 3 baskets of Dhamma, Tini Pitakani, Pagunani Akasi. He may have also studied it in somewhere else, but he was sitting next to his teacher, Uncle Thera. And because he was very famous, Dhammadinna was very famous for solving the issues like Dhamma issues, and he was very helpful to the Sangha. The entire Sangha society respected him as one of the fathers of the community. So he was involved in teaching Dhamma, preaching Dhamma, solving Dhammas. So just being next to him, like staying closer to him, the Samanera could develop his wisdom. So that is also one of the benefits if you are associating a very great Mahathera, learned person. You get the opportunity to listen to Dhamma very frequently. Especially this privilege is enjoyed by the attendant monks, like the ones who are attending the Mahathera, especially a senior person, a erudite person, learned one who is skilled in Dhamma preaching. Obviously, he will have the great opportunity. The attending monks will have the great opportunity of listening to what the Thera is preaching. And these days they do record such discussions that are very valuable, because now, if for instance in our tradition, the most of the Dhamma the Buddha has preached are not recorded. That's a known fact. That's an accepted norm in our Theravada tradition, because the teachings that he gave at houses after accepting meals are not, most of them are not recorded. And it is also mentioned that such talks are very long, very fast. It's not easy for anyone to remember it as it was preached, even though they get understanding. And then we also find occasions where the Buddha regularly and daily had discussions with the monks. After preaching the Dhamma to the lay people who came to the monastery, and some of those talks were also not mentioned, not recorded, they were long, fast talks. And then after that, he gave the opportunity for the monks to come and discuss about their issues. Maybe some Dhamma issues were discussed, Vinaya issues were discussed, meditation instructions were gained. So most of them are not recorded. Had they got the equipments that we have today, surely they would have recorded what the Buddha was preaching, and also they would have recorded his figure as well. That would have been a great opportunity. But unfortunately, the technology was not developed to that level those days. So it's very useful to be with such a person, and Sudhamma Samanera enjoyed this privilege of being with his uncle Thera, who was one of the greatest arahants who appeared in Sri Lanka. Then Paripuccha are the commentaries, explanations. So they are called Paripuccha. Normally commentaries are expounded as an answer to the questions. So when someone asks what is the meaning of this teaching, of this portion of teaching, that would be elaborated with the explanation of commentary. Commentaries means an exposition on something. So we can find commentaries in any religion, even there are commentaries to the Bible, and commentaries to the Quran, and we have commentaries to the Tipitaka. So commentaries means the explanations, elaborations of some original teachings, where commentarial features are found also in Niddesa Pali, which we consider as one of the major books in our Tipitaka. We can see how the Sutta Nipata has been elaborated, explained. In a similar, sometimes the repetition is obviously there, but that is also type of a commentary explanation. Some suggest that Abhidhamma also has that unique feature. Now a portion was given, now a Chitta was explained, and Chitta was further explained at later stages. So the commentarial feature was found even in some sutras we find, especially Satya Vibhanga Sutta. Venerable Sariputta elaborated the meanings of the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the initial Dhamma discourse the Buddha delivered. And so normally the commentaries are questions, answers given to questions. When the original teachings was questioned or some clarification is needed, yes, commentaries was needed. So in commentaries we find cross references. Some teachings have to be explained based on other teachings, and also some new fundamentals like hidden fundamentals were taught. So there are many things to study. In the commentary literature is something very interesting to study. So commentaries are so called as they are the explanations normally given after questions. When someone explains the meanings of the Buddha's words, one has studied, his or her Patisambhida jnanas become purified. So Paripuccha here means explains the meanings of the Buddha. Now he is preaching the commentary, the one who is preaching the commentary. By preaching the commentary, giving the explanations, the person's Patisambhida jnanas would get elaborated, would get purified. So for example, in ancient Sri Lanka, there were traditions of Dhamma preaching. There was a tradition called 5-seat Dhamma talk. 5-seat Dhamma talk, for example, the 5 Theras are sitting, 4 at the corners and 1 in the middle. I got to know about this from one of the vice presidents of Asgiri Mahanika, who later became the chief monk, who became a Mahanayaka as well, and who passed away after coming to the position. He passed away soon. He couldn't stay in the position for a long time. While he was the vice chairman, while he was the vice Thera, the second Thera, I had the privilege of meeting him, and he was explaining things that happened in 1920s and so on in villages and in certain towns, and he was invited to this kind of a talk. This is called a 5-seat Dhamma talk. 5-seat Dhamma talk. So what does it mean? In a 5-seat Dhamma talk, 1 Thera is placed in the center and 4 learned Theras are sitting on the 4 corners. Then what happens? The chair in those days, somehow they were managed to make a chair that could rotate using the technology they had. It can be done by rotating the chair as well. So he was explaining it with fun, like how he felt as a young monk. By then he was quite old when I met him. So he was sitting here, and the devotees make him to turn towards one direction. Then he has to preach a certain portion of a sutra. I forgot which sutta he was referring to. Then what happens when he preaches this monk starts to explain its commentary, its explanation. Then after he has finished this portion, maybe one gatha, then he is turned towards another direction. Then he preaches another stanza, the next monk preaches the explanation. So likewise, the 5, it's a very nice thing, like 5-chair Dhamma talk. So what they were doing was, they were explaining the teachings, original teachings, and the commentaries were explained by someone else. But these days what we do is, one single Thera takes the Dhamma portion and explains it together with the commentary. So here, there could be one monk who has studied the Tipitaka very well. So this makes sense actually. This has some practical application. There could be some monks who are very good in memorizing the Dhamma, and some are very good in explaining the Dhamma. So there can be some differences in their capacities. The person who has a good memory will get this seat. He is the one who is teaching the original teachings. So he makes sure that the teachings are authentically preached, correctly preached. correctly preach. Then the others are responsible for interpreting this. Maybe some would have explained it in the same Pali, but mostly because you have to explain the Dhamma in the native language. So they were explaining in the native language. They were stating it in Sinhalese actually. So maybe if it was done in another country with their own dialect. So they are maybe the people who didn't have good Pali memory but are good in explaining, elaborating. So they had the opportunity to do this. So now all these are done by one Thera in these days. So maybe this was very effective in one sense. And when four are teaching at the same time, we get four different. It's not four different opinions about the same talk, but the Dhamma is preached by four monks. And people may get a different flavor of the Dhamma because everyone would have their own way of explaining because we are different human beings. So now Paripuccha means normally this is something that I want to say. They were doing the Paripuccha. They were doing the Paripuccha. They're explaining the commentary. They were explaining the commentary. So in ancient days, there were traditions like significant, like they have separated that the person teaching the Dhamma, teaching the Tipitaka, and the person teaching the commentary, explaining the commentary, were different. And there was also one monk, as mentioned in the Visuddhimagga, you can see this story in the book. He once studied the whole Tipitaka. He studied it, maybe he had memorized it. Then he struck the gong. It's called the drum, the golden drum. The name goes as like that. So he struck the drum and indicating that he's ready to give a Dhamma talk. That was a sign. Anyone who strikes the gong is now ready to give a Dhamma talk. So he said he's ready. Then the teacher asked, who is striking this golden gong? Then the monk said that particular venerable. So call him. He was summoned. Then the teacher asked one question from him and asked him what is the opinion of the Theras or how you would explain this. Then he gave the correct answer. Then the Thera showed a gesture as he was not very sure about it. And he asked, is it correct? Are you sure about it? Then the student was a little bit hesitant. Like he got confused. And he had a doubt whether his question was correct or wrong because it was a reputed teacher is asking this question. And the teacher showed a gesture that he was not very certain about it. Then he gave a different answer. Then he again showed the gesture. Are you sure about that? Then he gave a different answer. Then at the end, the teacher said, yes, also venerable friend, monk, student, you gave the correct answer on the first occasion, but you were not stable about it. You were not certain about it. That's why you changed the answer on the other two occasions. So, therefore, you are not suitable, still not suitable to preach Dhamma in public. So, go to that particular Thera and study the commentaries and come back. And then he learned it, came back, and then he was capable of giving the Dhamma talks precisely. So studying the commentary, some Theras were capable of teaching the Tipitaka because there were no books those days. So some Theras have memorized the Tipitaka, but they were not very good in explaining them. So one had to go to one Mahathera to study the Tipitaka, the original teachings and the basic meaning. Maybe would have the basic, surely they would have known some meaning, otherwise you're just remembering something doesn't make sense. So they have studied the Tipitaka, the focus was in Tipitaka, then you go to another teacher and study the commentaries. Because for example in Myanmar these days, now even these days we have tests, Dhamma tests. There's one test called Vinaya-Vidu test, which Venerable Siddhartha Lankara in our institute has passed. There are many Myanmar monks who have passed that test. So they are mainly focusing on the Vinaya Pitaka. They are not referring to the commentaries on those tests. But if you go to the Dhammacharya test, yes, the Tipitaka and the commentary both are referred. So there are traditions where you can study the Tipitaka first in a general sense. You know the words, you know the general meaning, and then if commentaries are taught with a deeper aspect. When you go to the sub-commentaries, which are later additions to the tradition, you get more deeper into it and you start to see the philosophy behind the teachings as well. That's a very nice feature in sub-commentary. You start to see various features that are not shown. Like commentaries were based on those philosophies, but sub-commentaries elaborate them. So it's very interesting. So Patisambhida jnanas become purified in the person who preaches the commentaries. As stated in Patisambhida Magga commentary, I took this from the Vibhanga commentary actually. Patisambhida Magga commentary says that the same would happen in a person who asks questions about the meanings of the Dhamma one has learned. If you are asking, keep on asking questions and clarifying the Dhamma. If you are getting new answers, correct answers from a teacher, obviously you are improving your Patisambhida jnanas. So one can say that amounts to savana. You are listening to the teacher's answer. Savana is mostly the Buddha's teachings. And now paripuccha, so they have differentiated this. Studying the Buddha's teachings is done with savana, and paripuccha you are doing, if you take the Patisambhida Magga commentaries way, learning the commentaries would be paripuccha. And the person who is asking the question, even the question, asking questions, is you need to have some understanding in order to ask a question about a certain topic. You are not completely sure about it, but you have grasped a certain concept, and why we ask is mostly to clarify the doubt or to make sure that my understanding is correct. There are various ways you can ask questions. So mostly we ask them to clarify our doubts. And so it's a very clear distinction here, studying the Tipitaka and studying the commentaries. According to the Vibhanga commentaries method, explaining the commentaries would also become a reason for the purification of Patisambhida jnana. Venerable Tissadatta Thera, who was found in the section of Pariyatti as well. Pariyatti is studying the Dhamma actually. Sorry, Pariyatti is studying the Dhamma, Savana is listening to Dhamma. So there were two things. So Pariyatti is studying the Buddha's words, and Paripuccha is studying, preaching the commentaries, or asking questions and getting good answers about the commentaries. They have some similarities. Savana is listening to Dhamma Talks. So Venerable Tissadatta Thera's Patisambhida became purified when expounding the meanings of Tipitaka teachings he had studied according to the Vibhanga commentary. So he expounded the Buddha's teachings, elaborated them as these monks, and then his Patisambhida jnana became purified. Then Pubbā Yoga, being a meditation practitioner in past lives. This means being a meditator who has embraced meditation in terms of Gata, Paccha, Gata, Vata. This is a very nice practice. Gata, Paccha, I think CH, right? Paccha, Gata. Paccha, no, it's CA. Paccha, Gata, Vata. Gata and Paccha, Gata. So the two words are Gata, going, Pachagata. Pacha means returning, right? Pachagata. Agata, Pati Agata, Pachagata. So this means, and it also refers to as Harana Pachaharana. Harana Pachaharana. Harana means taking. Gata is like having gone, right? We'll explain this with this term. Harana Pachaharana. We have two words for this. This is the same practice. Harana means you are taking. Pachaharana is taking, bringing it back. What does it mean by taking and bringing it back? There should be an object of taking. Taking, the object that is taken and brought back is the meditation subject. Meditation subject, which we called Kammatthana in Pali. Kammatthana. Monks are supposed to take their Kammatthana and bring their Kammatthana. Where do the monks go? They are supposed to go daily to the village. Why? To collect alms. If they are lucky, the monks people would come and offer foods, like as it happened in Sri Lanka these days. As a country, the people are bringing. Even in Myanmar, they are going to offer, but most of the Myanmar monks go for Pindapata because the number of monks is huge. That it's very difficult to feed them. Feed them means it's a huge number, and it's also part of their practice. And so regularly, monks would go to the village, and while going and coming back, they are supposed to take their Kammatthana without abandoning it, and to come back with it. Gata Paccha Gata. Harana Paccha Harana means you go with the Kammatthana and come back with the Kammatthana without forgetting it. That's what is meant here. So there are 4 types of yoga, 4 types of monks in this regard. One monk, Gata, the Harati, he takes it. Na Paccha Harati, he doesn't bring it back. What type of monks are they? They are very good virtuous monks, learned ones, and who are very famous. They are very dedicated to the practice, but at the same time, they are involved in teaching the Dhamma, and they are very famous. So in the beginning of the day, they wake up early morning, and they do their duties and by themselves, because no one is going to come and ask questions in the early morning as soon as you wake up. So he is doing his stuff and cleaning himself, and with the contemplation of a meditation subject, he slowly goes to the village. So when he reaches the village, he's going with the Kammatthana. There are things you do normally before you go to the village. You pay respect to the Bodhi tree, you pay respect to the Chaitya, and if there's duties to be done, you have to finish them, and then you go. Normally these days we go Pindapata early in the morning. Those days they may get late because they have to do the duties in the daily tasks. Anyway, the traditions have changed now. So when he's going, it goes with a meditation subject, mindfully, step by step. Then while reaching closer to the village, what happens, because since he's a reputed monk, a Mahathera or someone who is very skilled, people come to him and ask the questions about days, because those days they didn't have calendars. So monks knew the Uposatha, so monks were a good resource to ask which day is the next Uposatha and which day is today and so forth. And also monks had some understanding about the Nakshatras, the stars and astrology as well. So they come and ask. So when you ask such a question, being asked such a question, you have to answer the person. You cannot keep silent. So he starts answering, and then the conversation begins. So someone comes and asks a Dhamma question. Some monks from another monastery is waiting to clarify some Dhamma issues, and he has to give a Dhamma talk in the audience to the people. And while returning back, some people are accompanying him because he's very famous. He got many requisites, so they are bringing them. On the way, he's talking with them, and not unnecessary stuff, but Dhamma issues. Then after returning back, the monks in the monastery gather and start studying Dhamma with him. So he's a person who in the early morning, he takes the Kammatthana with him, but he doesn't bring it back. He doesn't bring it back means in most of the cases when you're teaching Dhamma, it's very difficult to normally the person will be able to maintain a good wholesome mind while talking Dhamma. There's no Dhamma that is apart from a Kammatthana, that's okay, but it's very difficult to develop a Samadhi-like concentration while preaching Dhamma, unless the person is very attentive. So in most of the cases, you lose that meditative feature in you when you're teaching the Dhamma. We know that way because we are involved in a lot of teaching. So he's a person who takes the meditation subject but doesn't bring it back. Then there's another person who doesn't take but brings it back. So that is the person who has gastritis, who is affected by gastritis in the morning. If I give it a present day terminology. So the ones who have some burning sensations in the early morning due to not having food in the stomach for 18 hours. So early morning he does his duties, pay respect, but he does everything very quickly. He's unable to focus well because his gastro is affecting him. So he goes quickly, the commentator, he goes quickly because he is in need of something to his stomach. So in the early morning, some people used to offer yagu or porridge. So he's in search of yagu. He's going to the houses where he could find yagu. He's a bit restless. He may try to focus on the Kammatthana. The mind is scattered because he's focused on the pain and it's stressful. So at one house, he gets the porridge and he goes. You don't drink porridge on the spot when you get, unless there's a very serious issue. There's a story where one Arahant had done that, but normally we don't do that. So they go to a asana sala where the seats are set for monks to have their meal. Then he reaches there, sits there and drinks the yagu. While taking the first few sips, then the uncomfort goes away. Then from that moment he will be able to re-establish his mindfulness. They are good practitioners. So he re-establishes the mindfulness and starts doing everything mindfully, and then wait in the asana salas till the lunchtime, meditate there, go for Pindapata, collect food, come back and keep on meditating. And the commentary says there are no, in the ancient Sri Lanka, out of many asana salas that were established throughout the island, there were no seat on which someone had not become an Arahant while waiting for the lunch. So that was a glorious time in Sasana. So there is a person who doesn't take it but brings it back. Then the one who doesn't take and doesn't bring, nothing to talk about that monk. He's not mindful, he's very negligent, and he just walks and comes back, and whenever he meets someone, he just talks unnecessary talks, and he's not into the track, he's not practicing at all. Then the one who takes it and brings it back is the one who mindfully goes with attentiveness, with Kamatana, mindfulness, and brings it back and keeps on meditating all day. So a practitioner, Patisambhida person has to have done that gata pacca gata harana pacca harana to some extent, maybe to some years at least. And normally what they do is in this practice, now taking the Kamatana to which extent? So does it mean that you can forget and go for some distance, because we tend to forget our Kamatana sometimes. So there is a practice explained in the commentaries. Some ancient Theras of the antiquity, they had a custom, or they adopted a practice saying that if someone happens to forget the Kamatana, and suddenly, if the mind is completely lost in the meditation subject, he suddenly has to stop on the spot. He stops on the spot. And the ones who are following him will also stop. Then he tried to bring his mind back to the Kamatana, overcome the defilement, and he walks on. Sometimes some may get into the noble stage at that point. If the defilement is too strong, some used to sit on the road, and the other monks also sit on the road. It would have been a weird situation these days, but those days they used to sit on the road, because beside the road, and start. And then he feels like all my junior monks are waiting, because no one traditionally you would not to overtake a senior monk and go front. We don't normally do that. So everyone would sit, and he would encourage himself and sort of morally blame himself, fault himself, saying that because of your defilements, everyone is behind, and everyone knows that there's a defilement in you, so try to abandon it. So if he is able to suppress and walks away, start the journey, sometimes he may also be able to eradicate it completely and become a noble person, and starts going for Pindapata. So the monks who were alone adopted a certain practice. Some monks, if they happen to walk few steps without the Kamatana, they used to stop and go back to where they are finally very mindful, and from that point they start again. So they make sure that no step is kept in their journey without mindfulness. That would have been a very, very difficult practice. For some it would be very stressful, for some it has worked. So some occasions people were asking, Bhante, why are you going back and come? Have you lost something? So they keep silent. So there are stories about monks who practice for 16 years, so many years in this manner, and finally attain arahanthood. So that is gata pacca gata vatta. A person, even though he should be, what it meant here is, he should be a serious practitioner. It doesn't mean that one has to do that practice of coming back and forth again. It doesn't necessarily be that those are things that they have adapted, I would feel. But if he is very mindfulness is lost, he could at least stop and bring his Kamatana back and start walking. So the purpose is he was a serious practitioner in this regard. There's a story about another Mahathera, another very interesting story. He was explaining something to junior monks who asked the question, and he suddenly spread his arm. And then he again folded it and re-stretched it. So the junior monks asked him, why did you do that? Why did you repeat that? They felt that he was repeating his posture. Then he said, till now, I have never done, for a long period, I have never done any physical activity without mindfulness. So while I'm talking with you all, I made a gesture without attentiveness. So I repeated it. So likewise, some Mahatheras have adapted certain methods to give his mind a boost or a encouragement to be with mindfulness all the time. So in order to attain these Patisambhida jnanas, as stated in the commentaries, one must be a strict, serious practitioner who has adopted these gata pacca gata vatta in previous lives, or at least in this life must be, right? In previous life, or at least in that. So normally it says previous lives. So Pubbhapayoga, being a meditation practitioner in past lives. This means being a meditator who had embraced meditation in terms of gata pacca gata, harana pacca harana practice. When someone had been a serious meditation practitioner in past lives, his Patisambhida becomes purified. As stated in the commentary of Patisambhida, this means being a meditator who had been involved in vipassana practice, reaching stages closer to Anuloma Jnana. You cannot go into the Anuloma Jnana. You hit the Anuloma, you get closer to it, Anuloma Jnana and Gotrabhu Jnana. It means, as this signifies, having attained Sankhara Upekkha Jnana, higher stages of Sankhara Upekkha Jnana. Monks who had been serious practitioners in previous lives and whose Patisambhida Jnanas became purified in their last lives are uncountable, it says in the commentary. So I'll leave the remaining to the next week, and also I'll be starting. I felt like I previously thought to go into a detailed analysis of Patisambhida Jnanas, but I'll be doing it in the later stages when we come to those Jnanas themselves. So I felt after finishing this, I'll be going into the explanation of the Jnanas. Because otherwise there are a few things to be discussed. Is it Vipassana Jnanas are necessary, Abhinyas are necessary, and so forth. I thought I'll talk them at a later stage. So I'm interested in going to the Jnana Katha sooner, so we can explain each and every terms and get into the essence of Patisambhida Jnanas mentioned in the Patisambhida, because otherwise I feel like we are a bit lingering in the Patisambhida section itself. So that would be the lecture, and I hope you enjoyed it and got some knowledge. I was speaking a bit fast, but anyway, these are the requirements for Patisambhida, and there are another 8 requirements given by some other teachers, and we'll discuss them next week, and also we'll go into the discussion about the Jnanas starting from Suttamaya Jnana and so forth. Okay, I conclude the lecture opening the forum for the Q&A session. Okay, there seems no questions, so we can conclude the lecture, I think. Okay, so we'll meet next week, and we'll be discussing more Dhamma on this subject matter. Okay, wish you all the best. Buddha Sasanang Chiran Tittatu, Buddha Sasanang Chiran Tittatu, Buddha Sasanang Chiran Tittatu, Sadhu, Sadhu, Sadhu.